Padres Hot Tub is thrilled to welcome to the show our newest sponsor, Estate Leak Detection and Plumbing, right here in San Diego, California. I know it was just a few weeks ago that we had big problems in the Elsten house with our bathtub backing up. We didn't know what to do. We had to call a plumber. We got some guy out from a random company we didn't know. Next thing you know, he was showing me a spreadsheet of $20,000 of stuff that we could solve if only I would just sign on the bottom line. I think one of the most important things that we need in San Diego is a local, dependable plumber, preferably independent, that we can count on. Tell me, Chris, a little bit more about Walter and about Estate Leak Detection and Plumbing.
Independent and dependable. If I had to pick two words right off the top of my mind, that is my buddy Wally. We grew up together, Craig, on the sport fishing boats down in Mission Bay. We worked on the twilight boats and we were grinding away, working till 11, smelling like fish. And Wally decided, I don't necessarily want to smell better, but I want to make more money. So he went off, learned how to lay pipe, and that's what he's been doing incredibly well ever since.
You can find out so much. Go to their Yelp page, a perfect 5-star rating. Better yet, call Wally yourself. 619-300-7203. Take down the number 619-300-7203. Estate Leak Detection and Plumbing. Welcome to the Padres Hot Tub, everybody. Craig Elsten, Chris Reed, Raphie Cantor back with you. May 22nd, we record this week's show as the San Diego Padres wrap up a disappointing homestand and head out on what could be a pivotal, nay-defining road trip over the Memorial Day weekend. Gentlemen, welcome back. I wish we were gathered under happier circumstances, and yet here we are in good times and ill, in sickness and in health. We cover these San Diego Padres. And I say that with also a little tip of the cap to our newly married Raphie. Raphie, congrats on the nuptials on Sunday. You were already married, but congrats on the wedding.
It's different. It hits different when you get friends and family all gathered together. I did say to someone on the day of, if they lose on my wedding day, I'm going to take it personally. And they did. And I did take it personally. And I didn't have my phone on me the entire night. So I came back to my phone. It was like, tucked away in some bag at right after the reception finished. And I looked at the box score and I just had the loudest sigh. I was just, I'm like, I'm gonna let this go. But they won 7-0 the next day, so the team's fixed, right? We're good. We're smooth sailing from here on out.
Fixed. One win is all it takes. I heard for Lowe's so many weeks as the team would win one and then lose a bunch more. Chris, it's tough, man, and my thoughts went back to 2018. Do you remember when the miserable 2018 Padres, around this time of the year, won 5 consecutive series, and the team put out the 5 straight series graphic with Haas and Freddie Galvis and Travis Jankowski, like all in action poses, like looking like Charlie's Angels. And strangely, they didn't do that graphic for Padres lose 5 straight series, and yet here we are.
I do not remember that graphic. I do remember that time a little bit, and I do remember the Padres social media team just being a real bunch of tryhards to just do anything they possibly could to generate interest in the squad. The ballpark is selling out. There's still good energy in the gas lamp. And I do want to point out, Raphie, that my cousin got married on the day the Cubs went to the World Series. They clinched the pennant, and he is a lifelong Cubs fan. His father is too. And that marriage doesn't exist anymore. So it's not always a great omen. So you know, take heart, my boy.
Will do.
All right, let's dig into this. We're gonna get into the core issues around the San Diego Padres surrounding this team as they head out on the road. Spoiler alert: it's offense, but there's some starting pitching sprinkled in there as well. We're going to talk a little bit about Manny. We're going to talk about this road trip coming up as the show continues. But, you know, guys, we're at that point now, right? And we're almost doing this a week early. Usually the classical signpost for baseball is Memorial Day. And a little bit later, we'll even talk about the actual statistical correlation between your success at Memorial Day and what that generally means for your end of year record. But right now, we've got enough. We're beyond the quarter pool. We've got enough data to start talking about what this team is, as opposed to, well, you know, it's where they are right now, but all it takes is 3 good games, and these numbers will be completely different. 3 good games won't change fundamentally the numbers of the San Diego Padres at this time. And I want to start with the most basic Bill Center type number, okay? But I want to get right down to the basics. I want to call into Coach's show. But the Padres are dead last in baseball in batting average. As a team, they're hitting .222. This is in the year of the elimination of the shift, new holes in the infield, opportunity for offense to go up. Offense has gone up. The league scoring totals have gone up by a near historic level. And based on how generally offense increases in the summer, quite possibly a historic year-to-year increase. And in that time, the Padres are DEAD, dead last. A team .222 hitter? How could we ever be a great team if we're a team .222 hitter?
You can't. And it's particularly sad and distressing because this is Tony Gwynn's team. This is the king of batting average. This is the king of manufacturing runs of small ball. We had hoped that would be part of their identity, and it just has not. Like, they've been walking plenty, but not manufacturing runs, not showing good situational hitting skills, horrible to the point of just, you know, repetition of running in scoring position mediocrity. You know, if you want to build your identity around home runs all the time, then you have to slug a lot better than they have. And if you want to build your identity around manufacturing runs and playing small ball, you got to hit for batting average.
Yeah, and Raphie, we're going to get into some more advanced stats here momentarily, but staying with the basics, it's one thing, right? You can be dead last in batting average and be a very successful offense if you are tremendous at getting on base and if you're doing damage with like the majority of the hits that you're putting in play. But just transitioning down the slash line, the Padres are 21st in the league in on-base percentage, and they're 24th in the league in slugging percentage. They're 22nd in the league in stolen bases. They're 17th in homers. They're 26th in runs scored, which is quite literally the most important line of them all. The one thing the team does well, they're second in the league in walks. They're about 20 walks off the Dodgers for the major league lead. So the team does take pitches and they do walk a little bit, but they're not doing any of the fundamentals of the foundational things you need to be a successful offense.
Yeah, and I mean, just zeroing in on that scoring percentage statistic, which we like to tickle because it is historically awful, and pointing to a team that's doing things a little bit differently. The Dodgers' batting average with runners in scoring position is .257, which sounds, I mean, to us, roaming in the desert, it sounds like a sweet oasis. In reality, it's only 14th in the league right now. It's like basically dead in the middle. But when you compare that to slugging percentage with runners in scoring position, they're 5th overall with a .471 slugging percentage. So when they have their opportunities, the average might not be that high, but the slugging percentage certainly is. And that translates to a 123 WRC plus with runners in scoring position, which points to why they're having so much success. The Padres, on the other hand, have a 70 WRC plus. This is much worse than Trent Grisham in 2022. He had an 81 WRC plus. Which I might point out is about what Manny Machado's WRC plus is for the year so far. So we're now in truly historically awful territory, so far surpassing the mark set by the 1969 Padres that had the lowest runners in scoring position batting average ever for a team in the expansion era. So keep your eyes peeled on that.
Yeah, and the 1969 Padres, for context, were literally an expansion team that defined the expansion team era. They were the expansion team in a time when expansion teams got nothing from Major League Baseball. It was way less of a positive setup than it is even today. There was no expansion draft. They weren't grabbing all sorts of people, and they were a legitimately terrible team, like the worst team in Padres history. They lost 110 games, and this is supposed to be the best team in Padres history. So any invocation of 1969 with this team is a blinking red light on the dashboard that disaster has taken place through a quarter of this season. I want to get back to the advanced, what I thought was a fascinating advanced metric in just a moment. But first, Chris, let's talk a little bit more about RISP from a more layman standpoint, because look, hitting 191 with runners in scoring position, truly, literally, historically terrible, almost undoubtedly unsustainable positive regression to the mean is a matter of time for the San Diego Padres. But one thing, and we talked about it on a post-game show over the course of the last week, is approach. And there was reporting after Sunday's game and in Monday's newsletter about another team leaders meeting prior to Sunday's game, and what they talked about was team approach. And I don't think there's any question that the Padres have had a lot of individualistic at-bats with runners in scoring position, where with two strikes, players are not choking up and going the other way and looking to, or even as simply as on the first pitch, looking to take the pitch where it's hit and go the direction that the pitch is hit. There's a whole lot of, I'm going to muscle up and I'm going to pull a home run. And it's led to disastrous approach in those situations.
Yeah, man, absolutely no cohesion as far as this guy's going to do this. And if he's on base, then I'm going to adjust my game plan and make it about advancing him or driving him in. I was listening to a Rays analytics guy talk on one of the talking head shows, and they were asking him, what's been the difference? Why are the Rays so good? And what he talked about was communication between his department and the hitting coaches, and the hitting coaches' ability to take that information, compress it into a form that the hitter can digest and apply to the game. And then we see these blurbs about the Padres needing to have meetings to tell guys, hey, how about focus less on what, your individual approach to the game, because that what that tells us is that's been the approach. Let guys do whatever they want. We've seen the results of that. They suck. So you contrast with the Rays, the best team in baseball, have been doing with a fraction of the payroll, to what the Padres have been doing. It seems like they need an organizational retool, or at least refocus on what gets runs across the plate in baseball games.
I deleted Twitter from my phone a couple weeks ago. By the way, I haven't really missed it other than when I finish Wordle and I'm like, oh, I got to share this.
Guys, we did 3.
Yeah. Oh, I have nowhere to share it to anymore. Should I create a Discord channel for my Wordle score? These are the thoughts I have. But other than that, I don't miss it. But I have kept my account. I'll visit Twitter on my desktop. And one of the main reasons is for a couple of the people that I still think do really good work on the site. One of the best analytical people on the Bird app, is Too Much Morton's at Too Much Morton's. He was previously invited, in fact, to join Padres Hot Tub, have a drink before, and he said, I don't like to do that. I only like to tweet. But,
I love it. That person knows themselves.
Right? He's like, yeah, thanks, pass. I'm like, wow, you're a baller. But Rafe, he put up a really interesting thread this morning, and it specifically looked at the advanced statistics for how the Padres have performed this year on, wait for it, pitches right in the middle of the plate. If you divide the plate up, Brady Bunch, into 9 spots or tic-tac-toe, the center square, the Paul Lind square, all right? Boy, I just sounded like a Gen Xer right there with a Paul Lind Hollywood Squares reference. But Rosie, the Rosie square, right, in the middle. In that spot, the Padres' WOBA, weighted on base average, is 29th in the league. Their expected weighted on base average is 28th in the league, meaning that there's no lie to their WOBA. And their swing percentage is 19th in the league. None of those numbers are surprising to me at all, Raphie. I think it's part and parcel with both the passivity of the Padres lineup in critical situations and the fact that almost nobody on this team has handled a fastball well this year.
Yeah, and again, it's the sort of thing where those types of pitches generate value when you swing at them, because when you swing at them, that's when you're able to put up positive run value. And so by having a swing percentage in the bottom half of the league, that is inherently going to put you at a disadvantage to put up positive run value from the start. And of course, if you're also being taught to be more passive and you're not necessarily being coached on approach and when to swing and when to do damage and when to expect certain pitches, then you're also going to be further at a disadvantage to do damage and increase slug on those pitches. And I really love that you plug Too Much Morton's, because he also cuts up some video spliced up footage, and he did so for pitches down the heart of the plate, specifically for Manny Machado and Jake Cronenworth. And oftentimes what you're seeing is first pitches. You know, it's specifically on the first pitch where pitchers will straight up challenge the Padres and say, I know you're not going to swing, so I'm going to take this opportunity to lay one in there, get an easy strike, go up 0-1 in the count. And then once you're up 0-1, the predicted outcomes shift dramatically. You know, we talked about on our most recent Pods Above replacement, thinking about a plate appearance like a hand of blackjack. And if you all of a sudden are dealt 14 and the dealer's showing a 10 up, you're at a huge disadvantage. And that's effectively the equivalent of what happens when you're down 0-1 in the count. You know, the batting average league-wide goes down significantly. And so I think I don't have the numbers to back this up in front of me, but just based off of an eye test standpoint, we're starting to see guys swing first pitch. Matt Carpenter yesterday, who is the king of sitting on the first pitch, he had like a historically low first pitch swing percentage, like 12% or something like that, swung at a first pitch yesterday on a breaking ball that was not a cheapie. It was like right on the edge of the plate, and he put it right over the Petco porch. So for me, you know, that's completely anecdotal. That's one instance, but considering he was so dramatic in one direction, the idea that he is switching that up a little bit gives me some hope. But it's certainly a place where the Padres need to improve if they want to see those heart pitch percentages go up.
And before folks just go, well, that's the Padres, that's their problem, all they do is take pitches, nobody knows how to hit the ball. Understanding that 2020 isn't a real season and the Dodgers never won and it's an asterisk, etc. The Padres that year employed an extraordinarily similar strategy in terms of the percentage of pitches that they took and the lack of chase, and they were number 1 in the league in damage on pitches in the heart of the plate. So it's not like it's impossible to both be a patient team and a team that does damage. The Rays are a patient team that does damage. They're not as patient as the Dodgers. The Dodgers are a patient team that's done damage. historically, it's a matter of selective aggression and being ready for that pitch when it comes, having that confidence. Juan Soto's been able to do that his entire career, essentially, with the weird funk that he had it last year as an outlier. But most of the guys on this team haven't shown that ability, Chris. And I know that you were bringing into the show today as well. Just how many guys on this team are off to their career worst season?
Well, dude, that was the question that launched it. Like, it feels like if you have a historically bad runners and scoring position average, a last in the league batting average, you are going to see guys stacking up awful seasons on top of each other. So that was kind of the question. Like, is that the case? And what would you think, Craig? How many of the 10 or 11 regulars that we have, how many do you think are having their worst year, just off the top of your head?
I'd say almost all of them.
Okay, that is where I was too, my friend. And that's not quite the case. So I'm just going to real kind of quickly go through it and fire at me if something pops out. Fernando Tatis Jr., our guy, right? Who's been performing as good as anyone on the team, probably the best. Do you think Fernando Tatis Jr. is having his worst start to a season in his young career?
Yeah, I do. He's only got an 810 OPS.
Exactly, dude. It is his worst one, but I'm not going to dwell on it because he's been fine. If Fernando Tatis Jr., if this is his floor the rest of his career, we're going to be fine with it. We are going to see better days from him, but he's driving the team. He's producing runs. Juan Soto, this is looking like one of the worst ones, especially if you look at how much he's striking out. Juan Soto has struck out 45 times this year. In his worst statistical season, which was 2022, he had an OPS of 805. Right now, it's 70 points higher than that. He's hit the same amount of home runs. He's knocking in fewer guys, but he's getting across he's knocked in more runs this year than he did back then, but he's getting across the plate fewer. The biggest difference in his game from what it's been historically compared to his bad years is he's striking out a ton. Manny Machado, this is about the worst year Manny Machado has ever had. In 2012, the first year he was in the league, he had 50 points higher on his OPS and about the same everywhere else. You do another home run. He slugged a little bit better, 50 points higher. But the crazy thing about Manny Machado this year, why he is having his worst year ever, brings him clearly to number 2, is he's grounded into 9 double plays. We've talked about this. That's an insane number. He's already set his career season high total, and we're not even in June. That's approach.
Mind-boggling.
It is. That's approach. That's going up there trying to hit a home run and not focusing on getting guys over. So 2 out of our 3 stars are already having their worst years ever. And that brings us to Xander Bogaerts. He's at about there too, Craig. He's got the lowest batting average of his career. If we're going off the Bill Center stat, you can go ahead and stamp it, worst one ever. And when he came into the league, 2015, again, 50 points less on his OPS. So not great there. He's slugged better this year than he did back then. He's hit way more home runs. He's hit 6 home runs this year to his worst year ever. Was only 2 up to this point, and I think that was in 43 games. Jake Cronenworth. Is Jake Cronenworth having his worst year ever, Craig?
Of course he is.
No, he's not. The worst start of the year? Last year, he was almost 100 points worse. This blew my mind. Watching him lately has been tough. Last year, he was a little bit worse starting in, but you know what he did last year as a whole that he hasn't done this year at all? He hit 289 with runners in scoring position last year.
Yeah.
This year, 158.
And furthermore, if I'm not mistaken, Jake Cronenworth got really hot right around this time of the year, which helped propel him into the All-Star game by having a nice hot 6-week stretch from about the middle of May through June. So we're missing all of that. But, Raphie, it's interesting because I think this is emblematic of what the real problem is for the Padres from a construction standpoint. We have talked about it over and over. We are of the stars and scrubs model of roster construction. It is a way to build a team. But you look at it, there's 3 players in the Padres' regular starting lineup that have an OPS plus over 100, that are presenting as an above-average offensive player. Those players are Soto at 145, Tatis Jr. at 124, and Bogaerts at 115. And those numbers by themselves sound okay. But those being below their star level means that they're not producing star level. If your stars are producing at good or pretty good, that's not, you can't yell at Juan Soto for having a 140, OPS plus or 145 OPS plus. But the fact is, if all of those guys are 10, 15% below where they're supposed to be, that means the guys below them need to be 10, 15% higher than they're supposed to be in order to balance it out. And as we know, the bottom of the lineup is the opposite of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things we've talked about before, where when Soto came over last year and in 2022 with the Padres, he had a 130 WRC plus, and that seemed like, from an eye test perspective, that this was not the same guy and whatever, when in reality, that's 7 points above Manny Machado's career WRC plus of 123. The difference between last year and this year is that last year Manny Machado had a 152 WRC plus, and this year it's in the 80s. It's incredibly low, and you start to see the weakness exposed. You start to see the foundation become shakier and shakier and shakier. And I think we're going to talk about Memorial Day as a kind of a tent pole in terms of how we interpret the season a little bit later on. But yeah, I think it's the coalescing of the stars having good performances, and I think that's what's kind of led some of the discourse around institutional problems. It's that is this all just a giant coincidence, of which there frequently are coincidences in baseball? That's the whole effing point of the sport, is that weird stuff happens all the time. But it also begs the question of, is this something that's institutional, that's more rotten at the core, that we need to look at for the long-term success of the Padres?
Well, speaking of rotten, let's talk about the bottom of the order. And I've got to go to the man who you have a shoebox full of love and investment, Chris. It pains me to do so, but we got to talk about Trent Grisham.
Well, let me get you to him. Is he having his worst year ever, Craig?
Please, God, tell me yes.
No, man. He was way worse last year. And then that's what, at this point, yeah, this is all in the exact same amount of sample size as the guys have done in 2023. In 2022, through this point, Trent Grisham had 100 points less of an OPS than he does right now. That's my entire point of this exercise. Give us some perspective. Is it coincidence that all these bad performances are stacked on top of each other? Trent is striking out more than he ever has. It's weird that Juan Soto's doing the same thing. It's kind of weird that all these guys have K rates higher than they normally would. So Trent is performing at about near his career average. Career average OPS, 705. That's plummeted the last 2 years. Right now, he's at a .659. And his power numbers are about the same as they were last year. But the big difference is his slug. He's getting a little bit more extra base hits. He's got 100 points more on his slug this year than he did last year. He provides a lot of value on the defensive side of the ball, obviously. Just to give you a comparison to like some other center fielders that we're familiar with, Brian Reynolds is an all-star center fielder. He's putting up a .816, 150 points higher than our boy Trent Grisham. And just up the coast in San Francisco, Mike Yastrzemski, a guy we're all very familiar with. I don't know if any of us would be throwing our hands up to have Yastrzemski on the team. He's a solid defensive guy, and he's putting up a .765. And again, 100 points higher than Trent. So is Trent having his worst year ever up to this point? No. He's performing better than he did last year through nearly Memorial Day.
But okay, hang on though. There's lies, damned lies, and there's statistics. All right. So allow me to offer a little bit of context here, and I'm just going to pull directly from AC's newsletter because he's sliced it up just fine. Trent Grisham had a good April. On May 3rd, Trent Grisham's OPS was 790. Okay? 347 on base, 443 slugging. Since then, Trent Grisham is 2 for 39 with 6 walks and no extra base hits. 6 walks, 2 singles, and 32 outs is what he's produced in the month of May. So that's unplayably bad. That's where, by the way, Trent Grisham was in September last year. Unplayably bad. He put up every single flag that you could put up on the course saying, I'm a hitter who may not be able to make it in Major League Baseball. And then he had 3 great games against the New York Mets and 1 good game against the Dodgers. He struck out basically every other at-bat the rest of the playoffs. But he had 3 good games against the Mets and 1 good game against the Dodgers. And this organization, with the opportunity, having him get the bauble of the Gold Glove in the offseason, had maybe their last chance to have another team bet on Trent Grisham's upside. But the thing about Trent Grisham to me is that 2 for 39 is just baked into his DNA as a hitter right now.
Like a month in the season, you're going to get that.
Yeah, if you're going to play him, you're going to get at least a month of absolutely nothing at the plate. And it might be longer than that. But you're going to get at least that. And that really F's up the offense at the bottom of the order. Now, when you mix in, Raphie, Austin Nola with a negative 0.5 F WAR at this point in the year, that you're stacking up a pitcher spot essentially back-to-back. Austin Nola with a 26% strikeout percentage and a 202 slugging percentage. I mean, it's as bad a combination as you... Oh, and by the way, unlike Trent Grisham, who the statistics say has not been a good outfielder this year, although I think the eye test says he's been fine, Austin Nola is provably one of the worst defenders in all of baseball.
I'm feeling like I'm beginning to run out of things to say about Austin Nola because I think we keep coming back to the same.
202 slug says enough, my friend. 202.
He is not a Major League Baseball player. He does not belong on this. He doesn't belong on any team. Let alone a team that has playoff and beyond aspirations. We would literally be better off bringing up Pedro Severino. Oh wait, he's no longer on the team. So we're kind of in that situation that we keep coming back to. Unless we make a trade, unless we make some sort of minor league free agent signing, we are completely boxed into Austin Nola, and we're having a guy who is barely a AAA player, anchor our defensive alignment, anchor, our pitch calling, anchor our framing, like every aspect of the game that is so crucial. So I don't have much else to say other than he doesn't belong on the team and we need to move on.
Well, moving on, as you said, is pretty tricky, right? Starting with Grisham, I would suggest that there is at least a semi-obvious alternative. Fernando Tatis Jr. right now, you pull up his baseball savant. Sprint speed, 98th percentile. Outs above average, 95th percentile. Outfielder jump, 100th percentile. Arm strength, 99th percentile. That'll play all day, and that'll play in center field just fine. Putting your fastest player in center field is logical. Putting a plus offensive player into a critical position such as center field allows the opportunity for a team to improve their offense by then putting an offensive player in an offensive position such as right field. The problem we have right now with the San Diego Padres, Chris, and it's leading into kind of the meta concerns here, is right now when we talk about putting a right fielder in and moving Tatis to center, the right fielder is either maybe David Dahl in a week.
Yeah.
It's Rougned Odor in right field, or Jose Azocar in right field, or Brandon Dixon in right field. And none of these are improve the team options. All of these guys are just as likely to be as bad as Trent Grisham, and especially when you combine what they're going to bring with the glove out to right field, probably a worse option than Trent Grisham. And so just like catcher, although I do have a note on that in a second, Rafe, just like catcher, it feels like the most obvious thing you could do is difficult unless Peter Seidler's got another level in terms of, I'm just going to spend more and more and more money, and we're going to try and reach outside the organization for a right fielder. The options to make this better are not very appealing.
No, John Prakota in Pods Above Replacement early in the season kind of laid out the only scenario that moves Tatis over to center field, and then you explore a rental bat on the trade market, in right field. And that's a pretty logical way to go about it. If they decide that Trent Grisham, we can't live with 30 to 60 days of sub-professional performance at the plate, and you got to move on. Teams are moving on from outfielders all around the league. Aaron Hicks just got DFA'd. Hunter Dozier just got DFA'd because the corner bat is one of the most kind of available guys around. They're not that expensive. You can find them. There are going to be teams selling at the deadline or before the deadline where you can find it. I do think we lose something in the defense if it's a total black hole there, because then our only above average defender becomes a guy who has played outfield less than 60 games in his career, and he's now the captain of the outfield.
Right.
But, on the flip side of that, Tatis has done nothing to make me doubt that he will be, a worse defender than Trent Grisham in center field. The dude has been fantastic, and I think that's a scenario that could play out probably a little bit more simply than we think.
I don't know, Raphie, how much more money the Padres have before they hit another tax threshold if they were to just consider bringing in an import rental.
It's not a lot. I'm going to Google furiously to try and find it when you guys move on. But again, we'd be paying for a fraction of that salary for a fraction of the part of the season. So we do have that going for us. But, again, we've talked about Yasmani Grandal, and that's someone who the Chicago White Sox, for instance, would probably be willing to take on a chunk of their salary in return for either better prospect capital or just straight up salary relief, because I know that Jerry Reinsdorf doesn't necessarily want to be spending a lot of money the way that Peter Seidler does. So, those are potential opportunities where we've talked about the Padres finding the quote unquote inefficiency in baseball is just spending money, that they potentially have an advantage. If they're willing to just continue to eat more and more salary, they could potentially make an attractive rental trade that could help the team in the short term. The question then becomes, are you hampering the team not just from a tax threshold standpoint, but at the point where you're going to start losing draft picks, which is pretty much the only thing that AJ Preller does exceptionally well is find amateur talent and bring them into the Padres organization. And if you're limiting that tool, then you're really starting to limit what AJ can do for the organization going forward, which I know is part of the conversation that we're having currently, Craig.
Right. And all of the opportunity costs are right now presenting themselves on the Padres ledger. As you look at, just as one example, Sawinski in Pittsburgh. And he's not a great player, but if you had a power hitting corner outfielder, left-handed swinger as a member of your organization, he'd be in right field for Tatis to be in center field. You'd have the opportunity to move on. The medium trades that Preller made over the course of the last 3-4 years have generally been 100% disasters for this team in terms of putting out viable 40-man roster guys in exchange for buying high on the Todd Frazier's and Austin Nolas of the world.
Adam.
Yeah, Adam Frazier, pardon me. Todd, we could have traded for Todd Frazier if he had 2 hot weeks in the Japan League. We'd be like,
he could have traded for Frazier Crane.
I mean, honestly, I look at the DH situation. I mean, Nelly Cruz is, a longtime favorite of Machado and the DRGM, and I think the social ties brought Cruz to San Diego for $1 million. He's quite probably washed. Having watched his last month of at-bats, he has no ability to recognize spin. I mean, whatsoever. Like literally whatsoever. I believe he's got the highest chase rate in Major League Baseball. And, Matt Carpenter got signed based on a really great month after 3 years of baseball where you wouldn't have ever wanted to sign him after any of those 3 years in St. Louis, and he's toward the end of his career. Buying on small sample sizes is been a leak.
But Carpenter's having kind of a middle-of-the-pack year from when he's going. Yeah, last year with the Yankees, 1.25 OPS. You're not, you can't, that's his first month. You're not going to get that. You can't assume that when you sign the guy. But you can assume that they've gotten, what they paid for out of Carp. But if you're platooning him at DH and you have 2 roster spots tied up, platooning your DH, you've lost that key guy that can fill in a right field or, be better than Rougned Odor.
Right. And not to pick on Matt Carpenter, but it's also kind of, to me, Rafe, about player styles, because this team that struggles with pitches in the middle of the plate and is passive sometimes to a fault, I mean, those are Matt Carpenter's career profiles all the way through. And having a guy who hits 211 but walks some in the middle of your order, that's okay if you've got one of those guys. But when your whole team is hitting 222 and then the DH is hitting 211 with some walks, it's not a great mix.
No, and again, it comes back to team philosophy. If the philosophy doesn't go much further than, hey, let's be really selective about our pitches, and there's not any sort of complexity to that, then it's going to pose problems, because then, of course, you're going to be a lower average team. Of course, you're going to be attacked more in the zone, especially, by the way, as the year goes on. This is something, Craig, that you've talked about long before I was part of the show, is adjustments. That's what Major League Baseball is all about, is that you start to build up tendencies, other teams start to recognize those tendencies, they attack those tendencies, and so you have to adjust. And the teams that are the most successful are the ones that make adjustments. So this road trip that we're about to go on, where we go and play a sneaky good Marlins team, a good Yankees team that, seems like, are they actually good? But reminder, they're playing in an insanely difficult division, and they have about the same record as the Dodgers right now. So even though I think that they're in 3rd place or something, so, it's just, the numbers are a little obfuscating, and a team that they should handle in the Nationals. So I think it's a good benchmark, because we have teams that are in 3 distinct tiers, and it's a time to find out if we are going to be able to make adjustments. So I think that that's the present challenge that's facing us, Craig.
I've got one more stat before we take a middle break here on the pod. My buddy Ben and Woods had a tweet yesterday that I think caught a lot of people by surprise, because the Padres are 6-12 in May, and that's depressing, obviously. And yet, the Padres have a +5 run differential in the month of May. They're 61 up and 56 down in terms of run for, runs against in the month of May. Also today, our buddy John Gennaro texted me. Miami Marlins, sneaky good. Miami Marlins run differential is -54 this year. Detroit Tigers run differential is -51 this year. Both of them have a better winning percentage than the San Diego Padres.
The Marlins are winning a crazy amount of 1-run differential games, and the Padres are not.
Correct. And last year, the Padres were really, really good in 1-run games and almost undefeated in extra inning games. And it's been basically the opposite of that this year. And you go, well, that's noise. That's a mess. There's one thing.
Approach.
that really stands out to me, and I hope this is something that will be a complete outlier by the end of the year. I hope this is something that 2 months from now, we talk about this in terms of this stopped happening, okay? And I hate to throw heart, grit, tenacity into it, although Bob Melvin did call out the team's tenacity. AC put this out last week, and, look, AC's newsletter is pretty damn good this year. Did you know the Padres have come up from behind in any way, shape, or form 5 times this year? 5 comebacks of any sort through the course of 47 games. And, Chris, it leads me to something which I really felt this past week. And I have to say out loud, and I mentioned it on Twitter as well, the worst thing you can be something worse than bad in baseball. There's plenty of bad baseball teams. San Diego Padres fans have watched plenty of bad baseball and bad baseball teams. The thing that you can be that's worse than bad is boring. And there were many times in 2016, 2017, 2018 that I would tune into a Padres game and just see. And if they fell behind, I knew I could just turn it off because that's it. Game's over. They're not going to come back. They're never going to come back. I can go do something better with my time. August, September of 2021, you tuned in. Oh, they took a 1-0 lead. Uh-oh, they fell behind 3-1. That's it. Game's over. I can turn it off. I don't need to come back. And honestly, this last week was that same way. Oh, tune into the Red Sox game. Oop, that kid that I've never heard of at third base just hit a 3-run homer. That's it. Game's over. And it's that kind of stuff that's a doomer thing to say in the watch party. But like when it becomes true, when your team reliably never comes from behind and never makes it interesting, it makes it a lot less interesting to follow your local 9. And 5 comebacks in 47 games tells you that more often than not, when they've fallen behind, you could have gone and turned on the latest on Hulu and you would have been better off.
It sounds like those weren't even comebacks, Craig. Those were lead changes. And this is anecdotal. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I would be stunned if it was more than 2 after the 6th inning with this team. Listless is a word that comes to mind. And as a fan, you don't know where to put that anxiety. You don't know where to put that angst because you can't tell a hitter to swing at fastballs down the middle. You hope that the Padres are paying people really good money to provide that direction, to provide that, go get it. This team doesn't have any go get it. And the great team, the Padres in 2022, discovered that at the end of the year. They were always in every game. Every winning team across all sports has that in them. And where it comes from, great leadership, often. Athletes that want to beat the other guy more than they want home runs or personal statistics or contracts. That's where it comes from too. And the Padres need to find it. We're reading every day about them trying to find an identity to try to strip away we're a 6'6" bar clearing high jumper and go back to that you're a 6 foot high jumper and you can build back up to where you are, because their mentality is they're a championship team and their performance right now is that of a team that won't hit 500, let alone the playoffs.
I've got the facts to what I was just saying. The Padres have come back from a deficit of greater than 3 runs this season 1 time. And that was April 30th in Mexico City when they were down 4. So, yeah, they were down 4 on the moon in Mexico City, and they came from behind at, 70 million, miles above sea level. They came back from a 3-run deficit the day prior in Mexico City. Okay? They came back from a 2-run deficit to beat the Brewers April 15th. They also came back from 2 runs down to tie 2 games that they went on to lose. And those are the 5 games in which the Padres fell behind by 2 or more runs and even made a game of it. And they only won 3 of those, and 2 of them were in Mexico. So more lies and damned lies and statistics. That's a damning statistic, is what it is. And it's unsustainable. You won't be a playoff team. You won't be a championship team if you don't come from behind. The single biggest wins of the playoffs last year that we loved so much were come from behind wins against LA and Philadelphia. This team needs to find their heart. They need to find it and put it together. And the very last thing I'll note is that the Padres have signed a new minor league catcher. Kevin Plawecki has now spent 2 days at AAA El Paso. Kevin Plawecki, 31-year-old journeyman whose career OPS is 654, but he's never had a 202 slug in his life. 273, 286, 296, 265, never 202. Kevin Plawecki might be better than Austin Nola.
Well, okay, hang on. Before we move on really quickly, I was like, Kevin Plawecki, why is that name ringing a bell? Because when we did our catcher episode on Pods Above Replacement, we were talking about all the catchers. There were 5 catchers who had worse pop times to second base than Austin Nola. And we said, how could there possibly be 5 catchers who have worse pop times than Austin Nola? And he was one of them. He is in the first percentile in terms of pop time. So if you're looking for a defensive reprieve,
not there.
Nigh shall it be from Kevin Plawecki. Okay, so I don't know that we should be tolling the bells of celebration.
We should not be
in Gallagher Square just yet. Okay.
Oh my God. I think Doug Mirabelli would be a better choice than Kevin Plawecki, arguably. So you know what this team really needs? Anyone who's watching us on YouTube, we need to bring back the franchise. Franchy Cordero, that's what we're missing. It's that left-handed pop. By the way, Franchy Cordero has negative .5 WAR for the New York Yankees this year. So he's not the answer either. The answer for you, dear listener, is to stay right there, and dear viewer as well, because, by the way, the pitching's got some stuff to talk about, good and bad as well. I've got one question about Manny Machado that has really been on my mind for the last few days, and I'm going to ask it to you guys and the audience as well. And we're going to talk about the one thing that this team absolutely has to do to turn things around, all coming up right after this. Hey, a quick reminder to everybody on our free feed that Padres Hot Tub, sure, it's a Padres podcast, the most popular one in town, and it's been around for 7 years, but we're much more than that. We're a growing and thriving community at patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub, patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub, where for as low as just $5 a month, you have the opportunity to participate in our live post-game shows, our live group therapy podcast, to be a part of the PHT Discord, an actual fun place to be online, and so much more, Chris Reed.
I just want to thank everybody who has made the decision to go to patreon.com, sign up, put in all their payment information, and choose to support us. To have a few hundred people out there that have said with their wallets that they want to see the show go on, they want to see the show grow, they want to see it get better, is extremely humbling, and I really appreciate it. So, if you would like to support the show that you gain a lot of enjoyment from, I promise you there's enjoyment in physically supporting it, because I do the same thing with all the shows I love. So thank you very much.
Padres Hot Tub is 100% independent. We're not affiliated with any major media organization. No one else is profiting off of what we do. We have the ability, thanks to you patrons, to do this show, to keep that independence, to keep the honesty that you find so refreshing as a part of Padres Hot Tub. We're no slave to some media corporation or anybody else. So thank you for that independence. And by the way, if you like to go to Padres games, I'd say 2-3 times a week during a homestand, there's tickets that just pop up on our ticket marketplace that you could just buy or get from our audience. So it's an incredible place that's always growing. And for as low as $5 a month, we make it our vow at PHT that whether you're in for $5, $12, or $30 a month, that we make sure that that investment each month is one that you agree is one of the best ones you make in your year. So check it out for yourself. Patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub, Patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub. All right, welcome back, everybody. And we haven't talked pitching at all on today's show. And understandably, because the Padres offense is the problem.
That's the story.
It's the problem. It's the story. It's the entire year so far. But don't look now, but the Padres starting pitching has had its worst stretch of the year this last week. Almost every guy had a down start other than Michael Wacha. Michael Wacha has been dynamite. Michael Wacha has been the number one starter on this team. He's had 2 bad starts. He's pretty much kept the team in the game every other time. This club is 3-11 in their last 14. The 3 wins, Michael Wacha got all 3. So Wacha doing great. But when you talk about guys having their worst season, Chris, you went through the offense. Blake Snell is 1-6 with a 5.40 ERA. Oh, nerds, ERA. 5.56 FIP. 75 ERA plus. His whip is over 1.5. And while I know that, Blake Snell, second half Blake Snell, I mean, this is one of the worst pitchers in baseball. He's 1-6 with a 5.40 ERA. Like, we're supposed to be a good team. Blake Snell's our 3 starter. He's 1-6 with a 5.4 ERA. Joe Musgrove, only 5 starts. I get it. 1-2 with a 6.75 ERA and a 5.83 FIP. 61 ERA plus is actually worse than Snell. Darvish has been, for the most part, Darvish. Walker's been good. Ryan Weathers has been good for 23 innings. Seth Lugo, gets hit a little bit, but I think he's been pretty much everything you'd want him to be. But can this team be anything if Snell and Musgrove are going to be this far under average?
No, man. Those are their top 3. That's how we talk about them. We don't necessarily talk about the Padres with a team with 3 aces. We know that's not their case, but we assume they have 3 major league veteran starters who could go out and win you a game. Blake Snell, man, just when you think he puts together a good performance, the next one comes out and he's wild. He's not throwing strikes. He's not getting ahead of people. So there's regression within, the season. Like, that's the opposite of what you want to see. Joe, I've been calling him on extended spring training because he'll put together 3 to 4 good innings in a performance and then just get kind of sloppy, leave a slider right in the middle of the plate for somebody to absolutely smack. And Darvish and Seth Lugo have been hurt. Lugo's on the IL right now. And it seems like Darvish kind of just narrowly missed a stint. There was some weird reporting that he was going to miss a start, and then he didn't. And that start didn't turn out all that great. The questions are big. And Weathers hasn't been lights out. He's been good enough. He's been surprisingly good. And it's nice that we have that depth. But, man, we do not want to have a rotation of Darvish, Seth Lugo, Michael Wacha, Ryan Weathers, Jay Groom being the best performers on the team.
And, Raphie, you guys on Pods Above Replacement just did a Blake Snell episode a couple of weeks back. I mean, I look at those 2 guys' struggles as being extraordinarily simple to diagnose. Blake Snell is giving up a homer every 5 innings. Joe Musgrove is giving up a homer every 4 innings. Not good enough.
No, not good enough. And I've been also just digging into some of the pitch modeling statistics while we've been chatting, just because I wanted to see, where Michael Wacha was lining up in comparison to some of these other dudes. And the thing that's so interesting about Wacha is that his stuff is not good. His fastball was something that we've talked about on the show before. Is modeled as one of the worst fastballs in baseball. But his location has been fantastic, which is probably not surprising. So that even though the stuff on his fastball is not so good, the location on his fastball has been above average, and the location on his changeup has been especially above average. That tends not to be super sustainable because location is something that's really difficult to make consistent, whereas stuff is something that tends to carry from year over year. It's the reason why Blake Snell is going to be someone who is still sought after in free agency, despite some of his performances, because his stuff is something that's going to hold. In terms of something that I think might be able to transition us towards talking about the Memorial Day tentpole and, how much performance now is indicative of what performance will be later on in the year, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that the performances from our top three of Darvish, Snell, and Musgrove have been unsustainable from a negative perspective, that there's going to be positive regression. Blake Snell historically is someone who performs better in the second half, and that's consistent throughout his career. I appreciate your interpretation, Chris, of an extended spring training for Joe Musgrove. He hasn't seemed like he's been right the entire year. I don't think that will be something that persists over the rest of the year. And Darvish, a lot of his underlying stats are fine. He's still throwing wicked stuff, and that's something that I don't expect to let up at all. I think he's gotten snake bitted by a bit of unluckiness. But
that Mets game with the two balls down the line, I'll never forget.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that we're due for some positive regression from our big three. I think Michael Wacha, as we've seen, can give us a wide gamut of performances. And I suspect that his little hot streak that's happening now will not persist. Certainly, if he does not continue to locate the fastball as well as he's been locating it. But this bullpen, man, sneaky.
There we go.
Well, yeah, and literally just wanted to throw that out there because quietly amongst everything else, completely unnoticed because the team is playing so poorly, the San Diego Padres bullpen has pitched 26 and a third shutout innings in a row. And you've got guys like, for example, Luis Garcia hasn't allowed a homer so far this year in 18 and 2/3 innings. His FIP is actually 2.76. It's only a 0.1 less than Josh Hader's. Honeywell, Wilson, Hill, and of course Nick Martinez, who's been the best pitcher on the team in terms of ERA plus, other than Hader. But 40 and a third innings of a 2.68 ERA. I mean, Martinez in the bullpen has just been absolutely dynamite for this.
Well, real quick, Padres hot tub victory lap. We suggested that early on, and we also suggested that the bullpen would be strong, and they have been.
I would actually be curious when Seth Lugo comes back from the injured list if he goes back in as a reliever and Nick Martinez takes his spot in the starting rotation. They talked about doing a little bit of a yo-yo with both of those guys. It might be the right time to do that with Lugo and give him a try.
The fact is, Lugo hasn't pitched what was more than 135 innings in a season in his career. It may be an inevitability. I do love Martinez out of the bullpen. I think it's a straight up just personality fit. Like, I think he is a bulldog-shaped peg and a bulldog-shaped hole out of there. And I think he's an adequate major league starter, but he straight up wins us games in the bullpen. So maybe it's a yes and both of them, and we get to see one of these other starters, or that their scheduling allows for the 5-man.
I once was in a curio shop in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I found a bulldog-shaped peg, but there was no bulldog-shaped hole to put it in. That quest continues to this day. Rafe, I sent you a Fangraphs article from back in, I think, 2019, because it had one of those plotting graphs, and I always get confused looking at the plotting graph and where the x-axis and the y-axis, and am I looking at quadrants, or is this one of those taste guides? I just get mixed up from time to time, but I think I got the gist of the statistics when I read through the article. But Memorial Day, one of the classical moments that we look at, right? Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, as being these signposts in the season. But how much actual correlation is there between where a team is on Memorial Day and where they're likely to finish the year? We always bring up the 2021 Braves and the 2019 Nationals and, the outlier cases. But what's the more general trend?
Because that's going to be us, Craig.
Right. But what's the more general trend, Rafe?
So the general trend is it's quite strong. There's a decent correlation. Just to give the numbers for the nerds out there who would know, this article from 2019 basically takes every major league season from 2010 to 2018. So that's 9 years. So therefore it's 270 major league seasons, and it finds a correlation, an R value of 0.756. So it's pretty strong linear correlation. And to break that down even more, when you do regression analysis, basically 57% of the variability in the end of season winning percentage is accounted for by Memorial Day, by the Memorial Day winning percentage. But there's still 42.9% of the, so 43% of the variability that is unaccounted for. So, and now I'm quoting directly from the article. So while Memorial Day certainly tells us something about a team's end of season record, there's still so much that can change between now and October. And so I'm end quoting now. And basically, it spits out a little regression equation that I took the liberty of doing for the Padres in 2023. This is, again, based on a little bit of older data. But basically, it projects the Padres to finish with like a 468 win percentage. But that is not, I think, something that is useful for us in this scenario, because this is every major league season from 2010 to 2018. So basically what it's saying is that, teams that have a winning percentage, I'm sorry, I'm struggling to look at what our record is at the current moment. I know we're 21 and 26 when we're recording this currently. Right. But in terms of winning percentage,
hang on, I got you. 21.
Yeah, I think around 4.6 seems just about right.
447 is the winning percentage right now, and so it's projecting us with the simple regression equation to have a 468 at the end of the season, so to be in the mid 70s in terms of wins. That being said, that's for every major league season, and so that includes teams that are bad and then go on to finish badly. So when people talk about like the 2019 Nationals or the 2021 Braves or the 2022 Braves, even for that matter, and teams that don't necessarily start super hot and then go on to finish strong, one thing that those teams have in common with the Padres, and why I think they present somewhat more relevant examples, is that they are teams that underperformed relative to expectations out of the gate. And so I went and broke down the numbers from 3 seasons because they're referenced so frequently. The 2019 Nationals, the 2021 Braves, and the 2022 Braves, and just kind of looked at what where they were at 57 games in, which is what we're at now, how they finished from there, and what their projections were at the time, and how they finished relative to the projections. So the 2019 Nationals, which is the example which is cited super frequently, they started off worse than the Padres did. They started off 19 and 28. So terrible start, absolutely terrible start. From that point forward, Fangraphs projected them to finish 83 and 79. What does that tell you about them? They were projected to regress positively. They were projected to have from that moment, rest of season winning percentage of 555. That's a 90 win pace over 162 games, a 555 win percentage. So even despite the poor start, they were projected to finish with a 90 win percentage and finish with 83 wins. They wound up finishing with 93 wins. So they went 74 and 41 in the rest of the season. That's a 643 winning percentage, which works out to about 104 win pace. So a really ridiculously good pace. The 2021 Braves, they went 23 and 24 through 57 games. They too were projected to finish the year with 83 wins, according to Fangraphs, at that given time. They had a 39% playoff odds at that time and a projected 525 rest of season win percentage. So not as good as the Nationals. They finished with 88 wins, so they went 65 and 49 the rest of the year. So they outperformed their winning percentage by 40 points. The 2019 Nationals outperformed their projected winning percentage by 88 points. So I think that in terms of the Padres, I would say we have a much higher likelihood of finishing akin to the 2021 Braves, which is 88 wins and sneak into the playoffs, than go God tier like the 2019 Nationals and finished with 93 wins, which, by the way, in 2019, that was still a wild card team. It's worth mentioning. And they had to be, thanks to Trent Grisham,
Yes.
they made it into the playoffs and snuck in. The 2022 Braves are almost like not even worth mentioning because they started 22-25, very close to our record. They wound up finishing the season 79-36 with to total with 101 wins. So that winning percentage was a 687 rest of season win percentage from this point on, which is a 111 win pace. So historically good. So I bring all of these numbers up to remind folks that the window has shifted in terms of what we need to be performing to and what is considered successful. I think at the beginning of the year in our preseason predictions, we all projected the team to finish, somewhere in between 94, 93, and 90.
I was at 95, and I think you guys were like 97 and 99, weren't you?
Sounds right.
Something like that. Right now, today, I mentioned that the 2019 Nationals and the 2021 Braves through 57 games, Fangraphs projected them to have 83 wins apiece. Okay. And their playoff odds were 35% and 39%. Right now, for Fangraphs, we're projected to put up 85 wins, and we have a projected playoff odds of 55%. So that shows you that the models believe in this team. They have more faith in us currently than the models had in the 2019 Nats and the 2021 Braves. That being said, those teams outperform their expectations considerably. And so when we talk about the 2023 Padres having a successful season, that's what it's going to take. It's not just that they need to play, to what they're projected to. They're going to have to exceed what they're projected to in order to be successful. And that's, I think, what we need to be reframing as a fan base is that we have boxed ourselves in by this performance, Craig.
And okay, just real quick sketchpad to illustrate that, because you've gone through projections and kind of projection models, regression models,
retro projections.
Here's just simple facts, straight numbers, right? Our worst case scenario prediction podcast, we settled on a number, and that number was 85 wins. That was going to be the struggling version of this San Diego Padres team. The final record for an 85-win team is 85-77. In order to get to 85-77, the Padres will have to go 64-51 the rest of the season. Now, that sounds pretty doable for a team that's exhibiting positive regression. But all that positive regression could get you to 85 wins. And what's that going to be? The 6th playoff spot? Maybe the 5th playoff spot? An opportunity to once again be a road team in a 3-game series, a best-of-3 series, with the opportunity to face the Dodgers or a team that winds up being better than the Dodgers in the next round as the road team. And then if you win that, you have to win another best-of-7 series, and then if you win that, you have to win another best-of-7 series. It's an incredibly hard road to win the World Series from there. The Phillies tried to do it. They got 3 out of 4 steps. They got to the 4th step, and a rested Astros team with deeper pitching was there to blow them away in the final round. To get to where we want to get, 95 wins, that's 74-41. The rest of the year. 74-41.
What's that like?
That's exactly what the 2019 Nationals did, by the way. And that's, again, an extreme outlier case.
And exactly. It's an extraordinary outlier. And now let me put the last peg in the board. Right now, today, at 29-19, if the LA Dodgers continue their winning percentage, they pencil to 97 wins. And to get to 98, it's 78-37. 78-37, 41 games over 500. the rest of the season to be able to outpace where the Dodgers are. You have 6 fewer shots to bring the Dodgers down. You're on the verge of losing the season series to the Dodgers the next time you face them at 1-5 this year. And it's going to take 78-37 to chase them down unless they stumble and they fall closer to the middle of the pack and they don't improve at the All-Star break. So, I think all of this, Raphie, helps to illustrate it's early. It ain't that early.
Yeah, it's not that early, and I think we should be expecting at this point to think of this team as one that needs to firmly reach for a wild card spot, and that's the priority. Right now our division odds are 12.3%, but I also want to mention, by the way, Fangraphs projects the Dodgers as having a 92.4 winning percentage at the end of the year, and the reason for that is they're taking a lot of injury hits. Dustin May is out for a month, potentially longer, depending on how his elbow goes. Julio Urias is now on the 15-day IL. So their depth is starting to be tested, and we've already seen it tested in the infield by them playing Mookie Betts at shortstop because so many guys have gone down. So this is kind of what we were talking about when we were saying that this is the most vulnerable that this team has been in the over the span of a decade. I just think that we need to be focusing on the kind of day by day, more realistic things, take what we can control. And, to kind of bring this full circle and talk about what we were talking about at the beginning of this episode, that goes down to a pitch by pitch mentality of approach and controlling the things that you can control, because it starts to become overwhelming when you think about this thing. How are we going to make up the 7.5 game gap in the NL West? It's not something that we can handle right now. It's not something that we're probably going to be able to handle in a month. It's something that we're going to have to do day by day and pitch by pitch.
Hey, if the Dodgers settle at 92 wins, it's 73-42 to get to 93 wins.
That's big.
Yeah, all of these are possible, and bloody none of them are likely. And that was a point Jesse made on the radio last weekend. For every 2021 Braves team and 2019 Nationals team, there's 20 teams that get off to a bad start and are just bad. It's way more likely that you make a mild improvement over the course of the year to get to mediocre than it is that you go on a red hot streak. What the Padres have going for them is their personnel. It's the past history of these guys. It's the back of their baseball cards. And the idea, the concept that something that has not happened all year, meaning the top 4 guys creating a synchronicity where they're together like this instead of split apart and a whack-a-mole where one guy is good and 3 guys are bad, and then 2 guys are good and 2 guys are bad. We need to see them tight together and working together and all playing at or above their career marks, not a little bit below their career marks, in order for this to happen. Okay, so I want to ask each of you, and I've got an answer to this too, and then it'll lead me to my last topic for the show. Obviously, there's a lot of things it's going to take. Winning all these games is what it's going to take. But if there's one thing that you really, truly believe needs to happen for the Padres to go on one of these runs, what is that thing? What's the thing you'd submit on May 22nd? And Chris, I'll let you start.
Well, it'll go to all the stuff I talked about today. The fact is, the whole Padres lineup isn't performing thus far the worst they ever have. But the fact is that several of their stars are. Only 4 of the 11 guys I looked into are having their worst ever year. But their names are Machado, Bogarts, and Tatis. Soto is close. He's in the conversation for having one of his worst years ever. So if the Padres want to turn it around, they knew the scrubs at the bottom of their lineup. The scrubs at the bottom of their lineup aren't performing the best they ever have, but they're not performing the worst. So it has to be the star power of the San Diego Padres gets going, and that's on the offense, and that's also on the pitching side of things.
Rafe, how about you?
It's something that you have talked about previously, and it's something that I would love to see, which is a feeling of that these guys are playing for each other. and not going out there and sort of playing hero ball and trying to end things with one swing of the bat. I think that the statistics we talked about at the beginning of the show in terms of pitches in the heart of the plate kind of lend themselves to hitters wanting to feel like that they're in control of the at bat, of the plate appearance. And they do that by, taking the first pitch or to, trying to find their exact right pitch and seeing a lot of pitches per plate appearance to kind of get a read on pitchers and feel things out a little bit more. I don't know necessarily that what I'm just trying to say is, and again, I'm not from like an educated baseball coaching standpoint or anything like that, and I don't want to speak from that standpoint. And I'm not saying the solution is, they just got to swing more. They just got to swing more. I just think it's more of having playing for each other, and to me that means having a two-strike approach. It means understanding that, okay, I'm down in the count. I need to be a little bit more defensive. I need to up my swing percentage, but I also need to be fighting things off and specifically trying to take things the other way when things are pitched outside, and recognizing that that's going to lead in a reduction to power. And that's okay. That's okay when you're down 2 strikes because the percentage outcomes have changed, and now we're just basically trying to salvage things. But I think it's something that you talked about last week, Craig, process. That's process. And having a 2-strike approach and recognizing that you're going to try and stay alive to pass it to the next guy is, I think, what I want to see in the next couple weeks out of the Padres.
I'll just go and pick on our buddy in center field one more time when we talk about process and approach, because I just pulled up his Savant page, and he's got Trent Grisham has 4 hits to the outfield the entire year left of the second base bag. And of course, he has very few hits overall. But I always used to say that when Trent Grisham hits it the other way, Trent Grisham is like an all-star level player. And there's not even an attempt. There's not even a thought. There's not even a whisper of an idea in his mind to take that hard, high outside fastball and rip it over the shortstop's head into left field with the bases loaded every time he tries to pull it inside the right field foul pole. And it's a disaster. For me, I'm going to stay consistent to some stuff I said last week and what I think is a true developing trend on this team. And I'm also going to be pretty specific, but it does parallel what you said, Chris. I don't think this team gets anywhere near where they want to be at the end of the year unless Manny Machado comes back to this team and hits at an all-star MVP level. Not an 820 OPS, not a 115 OPS plus, not he got a little better over the course of the year. Manny Machado needs to come back and hit like he did last year, where he is repeatedly doing damage, where he is hitting that middle pitch into the second deck in left field, where he is taking it down the line, and he is being a consistent, dangerous player. Manny is the center of this team's clubhouse. He's the player that's been committed to for 10 more years after this year is over. And if he is just kind of a nebbish and a nothing and a 100 RC, WRC plus player for this team, they're not going to be any better than 500 at the end of the year. Manny's got to be Manny. And for all the talk about I'm Manny effing Machado and look at my baseball card, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, all it takes is 1 hot month. All it takes is 2 hot months. That Tommy Pham way of thinking of like, I can be crap for a while, but if I'm MVP we need it. Now's the time. You've used up all your time to be mediocre and negative. The Padres need an MVP Manny when he comes back. And if they don't get that, I'm afraid they're not going to get where they want to get.
Yeah, dude, that's what we also talked about in our Pessimist podcast is, 2 of the 4 have career worst years. That is the reality Manny is facing probably exclusively out of the big 4. With his performance, with the underlying metrics, with all of his expected stats, they all suck ass. And, for my fantasy team, where I drafted the dude number 1 for my Padres, my a big part of my heart. That's what they need, and they do need. He is the heart of the team. He is El Capitan. regardless of the other superstars on the team, that they've kind of chosen him as their personality. When he talks about it day by day, we gotta trust that. But if it's day by day into no improvement, the team's going to be 500. They're not going to make the playoffs, and I do think there will be changes.
I'll throw one other thing on the fire, a little worrying thing, but just a thing. I do think about it. I'm not going to lie. Manny and Fernando Tatis Jr. have had 2 full seasons together. 2019, everything fell apart. 2021, everything fell apart. 2020 is not a real season. It didn't count. The Dodgers didn't win the World Series. So that year they played amazingly together, absolutely amazingly, for 60 games. In the full seasons, it hasn't worked. This year, Manny's got 2 hits all year with Fernando on base. The team's winning percentage has dropped since Fernando Tatis Jr. rejoined the team. It's not Fernando's fault. He's been the second best player on the team the whole time he's there, but Manny and Tatty have to show me that they're better together.
They also literally moved Tatty to the other side of the field.
Yeah. Right, as far away as he possibly
as far away from Manny as they could put him.
It's like, I don't know. Manny committed to this team for a very, very, very long time, knowing that Fernando Tatis would be there. So, of course, he was given an extraordinary amount of money to do so. And there's no reporting of any rift whatsoever between these guys. Go look at the pictures from the Thursday gala at the park, and those guys are right next to each other, hamming it up. If they hated each other, they wouldn't be doing the stuff that they do with each other on a regular basis. So I don't want to say that at all. I'm saying on the field, you got to play well together on the field. And so far that has not happened. And it's actually not happened a lot during their careers so far. All right, which leads me to, go ahead. Sorry.
I've seen plenty of people act in public like they like each other when behind the scenes, when they're doing the work, they don't. I just want to put that out there. I've seen lots of pictures of people I know don't like each other from Getty Images looking like they like each other. So, my biggest fear for this team is they don't mesh as a superstar unit. And I'm right there with you, Craig.
All right. So Manny made some big news last week. Weird week for Manny Machado. If you count it as starting on Sunday, right? It started with a Sunday depressing shutout loss in LA where he said, hey, we'll come back tomorrow and we'll try the same thing and maybe we'll win, maybe we'll lose. And then that day they won, but it was a Pyrrhic victory because the jerk-off pitcher for the Royals hit Manny in the hand with a looping curveball that seemed to be chasing him like a velociraptor down the hallway. The way it pursued his hand as he turned away. Nonetheless, Manny suffered a break. And then on Thursday, with a brace on his left hand, Manny Machado was introduced as one of the minority owners of the brand new San Diego Major League Soccer franchise, which will either be San Diego Football Club or Football Club San Diego, according to their CEO, Tom Penn. Highly inventive name. Nonetheless, there was the Egyptian billionaire Mansour, and there were the dignitaries of the Siquan tribe of Kumeyaay Indians. And by the way, huge shout out to have the first major league team owned, or at least partially owned, by a Native American tribe in the United States of America. Incredible thing. And there was Manny Machado with a beautiful suit and a scarf and a moment up on the lectern, and he talked about it, and the Yahoo Sports story about it quoted him as saying that he has had a dream for years to be an investor in a soccer franchise, and is growing up as a soccer fan. And, so this was the fulfillment of a career and life dream for Manny Machado. And I'm psyched, right? I think it right away turned some people's attitudes. I think some people who don't care about soccer were like, whoa, Manny's an owner. I think some people who were kind of on the fence about MLS coming to San Diego for one reason or another were like, oh, whoa, Manny's an owner. I mean, local flavor, local culture. And by the way, nothing could be more local than the Sycuan tribe owning a team. But it left me asking a question. And I'd love to see this question reported out. And it could be extremely, extremely simple and straightforward. Because look around sports. And one of the trends in sports, and especially soccer these days, is kind of that equity partner with a showy name, right? And like when Angel City FC started in Los Angeles, it's Mia Hamm, and it's this person and that person, a Hollywood person. And, it's so exciting. And these names add luster, marketing appeal, credibility. And those deals can be as simple as an outreach and get together and a very simple agreement. And it could take days. I mean, it could probably take hours to hammer out an agreement like that in theory. But it could also take a long time. It could also take weeks or months. I mean, months to be approached and to meet with ownership and to learn. And I'd really like to know when Manny Machado first began the process of becoming a minority owner of San Diego Football Club or Football Club San Diego. And the reason is very simple, because on the first day of spring training, Manny Machado publicly announced that, well, the way things are right now, I'm opting out at the end of the year. And then, potentially peace out. And then Peter Seidler, within a day or two, was saying publicly, keeping Manny Machado here and signing him to extension is my top priority. And wasn't too long after that Manny Machado got the bag and got another $350 million added to his coffers. Did he get that $350 million and then Mansour and the ownership group approached him and said, hey, want to throw some of that bag into an MLS team? Because that's awesome. Or had he pre-committed to this? And then was the whole, I'm out of here, I'm a free... Was he going to go sign with the Mets and still be a minority owner of San Diego Football Club?
Yeah, it changes the I'm so happy to be putting down roots in San Diego narrative, doesn't it?
I mean, did he snooker Seidler to get the bag when he had no intention of leaving?
I don't buy it. I feel like he was a sort of, in the last couple months, add-on to this, just because I for that very reason, like I don't think that especially, by the way, from a strategy standpoint of the soccer team, it makes a lot of sense to take a gamble on making someone a minority owner who's potentially going to, leave the city. And then it's like, because the whole point of them doing this is that they now have, another face of the city from a sports standpoint attached to the team, and it has these like local roots and everything. And I think they've done a good job of that with the, bringing Sycuan in and everything. And, we could have the loyal debate another day. But I think that for the most part, things have been successful in terms of their rollout. And so I don't think that this is something that was in the works for much longer than, a couple months ago when he got that extension.
Well, and if it wasn't Manny, San Diego already has a sports icon ready to take up ownership of a franchise at any moment, and that's Troy Aikman.
What?
I mean, he's wanted to buy a San Diego team for like 15 years. I mean, they know his number. He's a San Diego icon, Craig. That's why he was going to buy the Padres.
San Diego.
So like, he's number 2. Yeah, he's ours.
Dan Fouts, Stan Humphries, Troy Aikman.
San Diego greats.
Oh, yeah, all San Diego. Joe Musgrove, Troy Aikman, Tony Gwynn, Troy Aikman.
Really quickly, this is a primary example because of why I think this came together incredibly quickly. And if you'll remember, on July 6th of 2020, Patrick Mahomes got a $500 million extension from the Kansas City Chiefs. On July 22nd of that same year, 16 days later, it was announced that he had become a minority owner of the Kansas City Royals. Okay? So this is something that can happen.
Yeah, it's a model.
Quickly. It's a model. It's a model. And I think it was very savvy of the Royals to bring Patrick Mahomes into the ownership group, especially because the Royals are playing non-competitive baseball, and so they need things to feel good about. And I mean, not against the Padres, but they need things, they need things to feel good about. And I think that like this is a primary example of, it's a feel good thing. It's a kind of a no-brainer for the MLS club. And it's a no-brainer for Manny, too. He's buying in on the ground floor of a business that continues to expand, and it's only growing in one of the hottest soccer markets in the country. So win-win for both sides.
I love it. Can we have it reported out? It should be a super simple reporting job.
The Athletic does those cool little vignettes on Madison Bumgarner sucking ass. Why can't they give us a thing on Manny Machado making a decision?
Put it in AC's newsletter. Hey, just, when were you contacted by MLS San Diego ownership group? When did that happen? It should be a great story. Oh, yeah.
It's a lifelong dream.
Or they reached out to me in mid-March, and said, hey, this thing is coming together and you just got the bag. You're staying in San Diego forever. Like, what about making your dream come true? I truly believe that's the far most likely scenario. I agree with you, Raphie. I mean, I hate to be like Tucker-esque there. I'm just asking questions, but I just think it's a question worthy of at least reporting out. It should be simple and it's not hostile. When were you contacted by San Diego MLS? Because if the answer was December, I mean, it is a slightly different story.
The question is, do you have any integrity at all, Manny Machado? Do you have an ounce of it?
Are you or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? Padres hot tub. Let's win a series. Oh, my God.
Mackenzie Gore, baby. They know him.
We'll be here with post-game shows throughout this road trip. Got to go get some win, boys. Got to go get some wins.